Picture the most famous palace in the world. Now fill it with rats. Not a few rats. Thousands of them, moving through the walls like blood through veins, fat on candle wax and pastry crumbs and the tallow that drips from 10,000 candles every single night. Add corridors so cold in winter that wine freezes in the king's own glass at the king's own table. Add courtiers relieving themselves on staircases because there is nowhere else to go. Add gilded ceilings painted by the finest artists in Europe hanging directly above floors where servants sleep on straw like animals and where the animals honestly sleep better. That's the Louvre in 1660, the seat of the most glorious monarchy on earth, and a building where a rat with a good nest in a warm wall had a softer night than the King of France. We're going back there tonight, not as tourists staring up at the ceilings, we're living it. One night, one person, everything they would have seen, smelled, heard, carried, burned, and survived. So, I make these history stories, and honestly, I have no clue if anyone actually sleeps to them, or if you're all just weirdos who like hearing about frozen chamber pots and rats the size of loaves of bread. Either way, subscribe if you want, get comfortable. Here we go. The candle in your hand is burning too fast, and that is a problem that can get you beaten. Not because anyone loves candles, because candles are counted. Every single one. There is a man in this palace whose entire career is knowing how many candles were issued this evening, to which rooms, of which quality, and how many stubs come back. And you, tonight, are 11 candles short of what the ledger says you should be carrying, because a page to one of the Queen Mother's ladies stopped you on the stairs of the Pavillon du Roi an hour ago and simply took them out of your basket. He didn't ask. Pages don't ask boys like you. He looked at you the way a man looks at a shelf, lifted 11 good white wax candles, tucked them under his arm for his mistress's card game, and walked away. And when Monsieur Vachon counts the stubs tomorrow, the ledger will not say a page took them. The ledger will say you took them. And boys who steal wax from the king's household don't get a second conversation about it. So you are walking faster than is safe on a stone floor slick with tallow drippings, in a corridor with no windows, in the dark, trying to reach the garde meuble store before the clerk locks it, to beg, to trade, to promise anything for 11 candles worth of mercy. Your name is Nicolas Perrin. You are 15 years old. You are a garçon de la fruiterie, which sounds like it should mean fruit, and once, centuries ago, it did. But in the king's household, the fruiterie is the department of fruit, candles and torches, because some clerk 200 years ago filed wax next to apples, and no one has ever unfiled it. You've been in the Louvre for 7 months. You came from a village near Beauvais, 2 days' walk north, with a letter from your priest, a spare shirt, and a pair of shoes your father resoled himself the night before you left, working by the fire with a mouthful of wooden pegs, not saying anything because he wasn't a man who said things. Back home, everyone said Paris would swallow you. They weren't wrong. They just didn't know it would do it one candle at a time. The corridor you're moving through runs along the riverside of the palace, and you can feel the Seine through the wall, not hear it, feel it. A damp cold that comes off the stone like breath, that gets into the wool of your coat and then into the skin of your arms, and then into something deeper than skin. It is late October. The river fogs at night, and the fog finds every gap in every window frame in this enormous, unfinished, magnificent, rotting building, and it settles in the corridors like a tenant who pays no rent. Your basket handle is biting into the crook of your elbow. Wax is heavy. People never think about that. 24 candles of white Bourgogne wax, minus the 11 that were stolen from you, plus 6 torches of tallow-soaked rope for the outer stairs, plus a horn lantern, plus your own working candle burning in a tin holder that has gone hot enough to sting your thumb through the rag you've wrapped around it. You shift the basket to the other arm without breaking stride. Your left elbow keeps the ache, your right elbow inherits the bite. Somewhere above you, through 3 floors of stone and gilt, the king is at supper. You know this the way you know the weather. Not because you've seen him. You've been in this palace 7 months and you have seen the King of France exactly twice. Both times as a shape at the end of a gallery, once in grey, once in blue, surrounded by men walking backward. But the whole building tells the time by his body. When the king rises, the palace inhales. When the king eats, the kitchens 200 yards away in the service courts go quiet and tense like a held breath. When the king sleeps, and he is 22 years old this autumn, newly married, and does not sleep early, the palace is allowed, wing by wing, floor by floor, in strict order of rank, to sleep after him. You're at the bottom of that order. You sleep last, if you sleep. Ahead of you, the corridor opens into a stair landing, and there's light there, wavering, orange, and voices, and you slow down, because in the Louvre at night, light and voices mean people, and people mean rank, and rank means you flatten yourself against the wall and become furniture until they pass. You've gotten good at becoming furniture. It's the first skill anyone teaches you here. Not how to trim a wick, not how to carry fire safely past tapestries worth more than your entire province. Those come later. First they teach you how to not exist. Eyes down, back to the wall. Basket held close so it doesn't brush a silk sleeve, because a tallow smear on a courtier's silk is a whipping, and it doesn't matter whose elbow moved. 2 gentlemen come down the stairs, young, loud, wine in their voices. One of them is telling the other about the Spanish ladies who came north with the new queen, and what he thinks of Spanish fashion, and what he'd like to do about it, and his laugh bounces off the stone like a dropped pan. Their shoes have red heels. You keep your eyes on those heels as they pass, red leather clicking through wax drippings and mud, and a scatter of chicken bones someone flung on the landing, and it occurs to you, not for the first time, that in this palace the shoes are cleaner than the floors they walk on. Neither man sees you. That's correct. That's the system working. You count to 5 after their voices fade, then take the stairs down 2 at a time, because the guard-mobile clerk locks his door when the palace clock strikes 10, and you heard the quarter chime a while ago, and your 11 missing candles are 11 separate reasons your 7 months in Paris might end tomorrow in the street. The stairs are spiral, cut for men a foot shorter than the men of this century, and the central pillar is polished black and greasy where 400 years of hands have grabbed it. You grab it too. Your palm comes away smelling of other people's palms. Everything in the Louvre smells of other people. That was the first thing that broke your head open when you arrived. A boy from a village of 90 souls dropped into a building where 10,000 people eat, work, scheme, cook, gamble, pray, and empty their bladders. A city folded up and stacked on top of itself, wearing a crown. At the bottom of the stairs the smell changes, and you know exactly where you are without needing light. This is the thing no one tells you about palaces. You learn them with your nose. The state floors above smell of beeswax and orange flower water, and the sweetish rot of cut flowers change too rarely. The middle floors smell of wood smoke, dog and wet wool. But down here, in the low corridors that thread between the kitchens and the stores, the smell is a solid thing you walk into. old grease gone rancid in the mortar joints, river damp. The ammonia sting of the corner everyone uses because the nearest privy is a courtyard away. Smoke, always smoke, and under all of it, faint and constant like a signature at the bottom of the page, rat. You know that smell now, musty, sharp, a little like wet grain. 7 months ago you couldn't have named it. Now you can tell how close the nest is. Tonight it's close. You hear them before you see the clerk's door. A dry, busy scratching inside the wall to your left, at knee height, patient and unhurried, the sound of small teeth doing steady work on the King of France's palace. The rats of the Louvre do not rush. Why would they? Nobody hunts them seriously. There are cats, and there are the rat catchers who come through twice a year with their terriers and their sacks, and there are 10,000 people generating warmth and crumbs around the clock. The rats of the Louvre are the most secure residents of the building. They do not owe service. They do not fear the ledger. They chewed through a beam in the old wing last winter, an actual structural beam, and the carpenters swore, and the rats moved 6 feet to the left and started on the next one. The clerk's door is ahead, and there's a thread of light under it. Still open. Thank God. Still open. You knock the way you've learned to knock. Twice. Soft. Apologetic. The knock of someone who knows he's about to be a nuisance. Closed, says the voice inside. The light is right there under the door. You can smell his brazier. You can smell that he has wine. Monsieur Renard, it's Nicolas from the fruitery. Please, it's about the Count. Silence, then the scrape of a stool. Then the door opens 4 inches and half of a face appears in the gap. One eye, grey, wet, unfriendly, sitting in a nest of wrinkles above a scarf wound 3 times around a scrawny throat. Renard, the under-clerk of the garde meuble, is 60 if he's a day, has served in this building under 3 kings, and guards his little kingdom of spare linens, candlestock, and broken furniture like a dragon on a very dusty hoard. The Count, he says, is Monsieur Vachon's problem, and yours, not mine. 11 candles, you say. White wax. Someone took them from my basket on the stairs. Page. I couldn't. You couldn't stop him. No, you couldn't. The eye looks you up and down through the gap, taking in the basket, the burned-down working candle, the wet hem of your coat. You know how many boys have stood where you're standing, telling me a page took it, a lady took it, and dog ate it. It's true, monsieur. It's always true. He says it flatly, like a fact of masonry. That's the joke, boy. It's almost always true. The wax walks out of this palace on the arms of people nobody can refuse, and it gets written down against people nobody can hear. That's not a crime. That's the architecture. He starts to close the door. You do something, then, that you would not have done 7 months ago. Something the village boy with the priest's letter would never have dared. You put your foot in the gap. The eye goes very still. I'll trade, you say, fast, before the fear catches up with your mouth. I'm on the night round for the petite gallery side until Advent. I pass your corridor 4 times a night. Your brazier, your burning charcoal ends you sweep from the kitchen court. I've seen the basket. I can bring you proper charcoal, a measure a night. The stove men leave the broken pieces. It's counted as waste. No ledger touches it. A measure a night until Advent, monsieur, for 11 candles tonight. Silence, except for the rats in the wall, working. The door opens another 4 inches. The rest of Renard's face is smiling, and it is not a warm smile, but it is a real one, the smile of a man recognizing something. 7 months, he says. It usually takes a year before they learn to bargain. Come in out of the corridor, boy, before the damp kills us both. And this is how you learn the second rule of the Louvre. The first rule is, be invisible. The second rule is, everything here is for trade, and the only people with nothing to trade are already gone. Renard's room is the size of a stall for 2 horses, and it is the warmest place you have stood in 3 days. The warmth hits you like a hand on the chest. A small iron brazier glows in the corner, and around it the old man has built a nest of his office. A stool, a table with a slanted writing top, a wall of shelves stacked with folded linens gone yellow at the creases, and, hanging from a beam, a row of tallow candles strung by their wicks like small pale fish. The room smells of charcoal, ink, old wool, and the particular sourness of a man who sleeps where he works. He pours nothing for you. You did not expect him to. He sits, wraps his scarf a 4th time, and looks at you over it. 11 white, he says. Bourgogne wax or Provence? Bourgogne, half-pound size. You know your stock, he sniffs. You'll want them to look issued, not stored. Vachon feels the candles when he counts, did you know that? Runs his thumb down the sides. Store-kept wax gets a bloom on it, a dust. Wax that's been carried in a basket all evening gets handled smooth. He gets up with the sound of a chair full of complaints, shuffles to a chest, and starts lifting out candles one at a time, rolling each between his palms like a man warming a bird. So we handle them. You see? Detail, boy. Detail is the whole of survival in this house. The great ones live on gesture. We live on detail. You watch his hands work. They are astonishing hands for such a ruin of a man. Quick, precise, the fingertips shiny with decades of wax. He rolls each candle, breathes on it, rolls again, and lays it in your basket with the wick teased slightly. The way a wick loosens when a basket has been jostled up and down stairs for 4 hours. While he works, he talks. You will learn, over the coming months, that this is the price of Renard's help. Not the charcoal, which is business, but the listening, which is company. He has been in the Louvre for 41 years. He carried linens for Louis XIII, the present king's father, a stammering, suspicious, unhappy man who liked hunting and disliked almost everything else. He remembers the Louvre when the court fled it entirely. 12 years ago, when Paris rose against the crown and chains went up across the streets and the little king, a boy of 10, was smuggled out of the city in the night to sleep on straw at Saint-Germain. The Fronde, they called it, after the slings the street boys used to break the windows of the rich. Renard stayed behind with the building. Somebody has to stay with the building. They came back, of course, he says, rolling wax. Kings always come back to Paris. But he doesn't love it, this king. You can see it if you know how to look. He walks these galleries like a man checking the locks on a house he means to sell. Mark me, boy. He'll build somewhere else. Somewhere with no streets around it, no chains, no Paris. He shrugs. Not my problem. I'll be dead. The rats will handle the transition. As if summoned, something moves along the top shelf, behind the linens. A soft weight. A whisper of displaced cloth. Renard doesn't even look up. That's Madame, he says. She has 6 little ones behind the 3rd stack. I let her be. She keeps the others off my bread. Rats hold territory, you know, like everyone else in this palace. She has this room. I have this room. We've negotiated. You look at the shelf. 2 eyes catch the brazier light for half a second, small and orange, and are gone. And you think about your own sleeping place, which you will reach, if God is kind, in 5 or 6 hours. A straw pallet in a low room over the north kitchen court, shared with 3 other boys, where the rats do not negotiate, where they run across your legs in the dark on their way between the flower store and the drain, and where Thomas, the youngest boy, 12 years old, from Anjou, still cries about it some nights with his fist stuffed against his teeth so no one will hear, except everyone hears, and no one says anything, because what is there to say? Yes, rats. That's the bed. Sleep anyway. Renard lays the 11th candle in your basket and holds up one finger. A measure of charcoal, every night. First round, not last. I want it while I'm awake to enjoy it. Miss 2 nights, and I remember nothing about this evening. Miss 1 night with a good reason, and I'm a reasonable man. He pauses. And one more thing. You pass the petite gallery 4 times a night, you said. Yes, monsieur. The gallery of the kings, all the portraits. He winds and unwinds a loose thread of his scarf. There's a stove flue runs up the north end of it. Old work, badly made. The mason who did it was cheaper than the mason who bid honest. When the fires are hot and the wind comes off the river from the northwest, that flue breathes smoke back into the roof space. I've smelled it for 2 winters. I've written it in 3 reports. You know where my reports go? He points at the brazier. Not literally, he says. Worse. They go upstairs, into ledgers, filed. A fire in the roof of the petite gallery would eat 100 years of paintings in an hour, and the report about the flue is filed. He fixes you with a wet grey eye. So, you pass 4 times a night. You have a nose. I can see it on your face. You smelled Madame before you saw her. When you pass the north end of that gallery, breathe. If you ever smell smoke where no candle is, not tallow smoke, not kitchen smoke, wood smoke, hot dust, hot iron, you run and you wake the Swiss guard on the stair, and you keep waking people until someone with lace on his cuffs is angry and out of bed. You understand me? Angry and out of bed. Anything less, and the building burns while the right people are being politely informed. You say yes, monsieur. You mean it as much as anyone means anything at 10 at night with a saved skin in a warm room. You will think about this conversation again later this very night, at a moment when your hands are shaking too hard to hold a candle straight. But not yet. Right now the palace clock strikes 10, muffled and bronze through the floors above, and you're back in the corridor with a full basket and a debt, and your night is only beginning, because a fruitery boy on night rounds in October 1660 does not have a bedtime. He has a route. Let me tell you about the route, because the route is the palace, and the palace, honestly, needs explaining, because the building in your head, the enormous, ordered, symmetrical Louvre of the tourists and the glass pyramid, does not exist yet, will not exist in its full form for 200 years. The Louvre of 1660 is a construction site married to a fortress, and the marriage is unhappy. 450 years ago, this was a square castle with a great round keep, built by Philip Augustus to guard Paris against the English coming up the Seine. That castle is gone above ground. Kings have been demolishing and rebuilding it piece by piece for a century and a half, but it is not gone from the building's bones. The new wings stand on the old moats. There are corridors down here at your level that follow the line of walls that no longer exist above, so the plan makes no sense unless you know the ghost underneath it. You didn't know your first month. You got lost twice a night. Grown men get lost in the Louvre. There are 550 rooms in the parts that are finished, give or take, and nobody has an accurate count because the count depends on what you call a room. and partitions of wood and canvas go up and come down constantly as lodgings are granted, revoked, subdivided, and fought over like farmland. Because here is the thing about this palace that would have made no sense to you 7 months ago. Almost nobody important actually lives well here, and almost everybody wants to live here anyway. A lodging in the Louvre, even a partitioned slice of a gallery with a canvas wall, even an attic under the leads that boils in summer and freezes now, is proximity. And proximity is everything. Offices, pensions, favours, marriages, survival. All of it flows from being near the king's eye. And so dukes, widows, and cardinals' nephews and mistresses of the last reign but one cling to their allotted closets in this cold stone hive, and pay their own servants to sleep across their doorways like draught excluders made of meat, and count themselves blessed. The king's own apartments are on the first floor of the south wing, the riverside, in the pavilion at the corner. The new queen, Marie-Thérèse, the Spanish infanta he married this summer, you'll hear about that summer, the whole palace still talks about that summer, has her rooms nearby. The Queen Mother, Anne of Austria, holds the ground floor apartments with the painted ceilings and the marble her decorators have been installing for years. Cardinal Mazarin, the real government of France for as long as you've been alive, lodges close, in rooms stuffed with more paintings and jewels than the crown itself owns, though the word in the kitchens, and the kitchens know everything first, is that His Eminence is ill this autumn, truly ill, dying maybe. And when he dies, the kitchens say, everything changes, though nobody agrees on what everything means. Around and beneath and behind all this gold, the service world runs like a second building threaded through the first. The great kitchens are not even in the palace proper. The main cooking happens across service courts, and food for the king's table travels hundreds of yards through open air and corridors, in covered dishes, in procession, which is why the King of France, the most powerful man in Europe, has possibly never once in his adult life eaten hot food that was actually hot. Wine cellars, wood yards, the candle stores, the furniture stores, a world of perhaps 8,000 to 10,000 people, when the court is in full residence, pressed into and around a building that would be crowded with half that. And through this world, every evening from Michaelmas to Lady Day, go the boys of the fruitery, carrying light, because the Louvre has no light of its own. None. When the sun goes down, and in late October in Paris the sun goes down before 5, this whole stone city goes black, and the only thing standing between the court of France and total medieval darkness is wax, tallow, and boys. Your route tonight. The guard rooms of the south stair, 6 tallow candles, replaced. The corridor of the maids of honour, wall sconces, 4 white wax, and you check the sconce backs for scorch, because a leaning candle against the old panelling is how palaces die. The landing outside the apartments of the Comtesse de Soissons, who insists on white wax at her door as a matter of rank, though the ledger allots her tallow, and you have learned to just give her woman the white wax and let Vachon and the Countess's steward fight it out in writing, because the alternative is the Countess's woman screaming at you, and her scream travels. Then the long dogleg to the Petite Galerie, then the torch brackets of the river gate, then back to the fruitery store to refill, then again, 4 rounds, roughly, midnight, 2, 4, and the grey round at first light when you go around snuffing and collecting stubs, because the stubs are counted too, weighed even, and the difference between wax issued and stub returned is checked against burn times because, and this is the mathematics your entire employment rests on, the king's household burns through candles at a rate that would beggar a small town, You've heard the figures argued in the storeroom. Wax and lighting for the royal households runs to tens of thousands of livres a year. Some say more than 100,000 across all the residences, at a time when your father, back near Beauvais, might see 100 livres pass through his hands in a good year. Your entire village, everyone in it, all 90 souls, could live for a decade on what this building burns in a winter, literally burns, sets fire to on purpose so that card games can continue past sunset. You don't resent it exactly, that's the strange part. It's too large to resent. You resent the page who stole your 11 candles, because he has a face. The system that burns your village's decade every winter doesn't have a face. It has a ledger. You hoist the basket. The handle finds the same groove in your elbow. Above you, faintly through stone, a burst of music. Violins. The king's 24 violins playing for the supper. Below you, in the wall, teeth. Both of them will still be going at midnight. You start walking. The guard room at the foot of the south stair is full of Swiss. The 100 Suisse, the 100 Swiss of the King's Guard, hold the doors of this palace, and at night the duty men live in these low-vaulted rooms in a fug of pipe smoke, leather, wet wool, and lamp oil that you could cut into blocks and sell. 6 of them are at the table when you come in, playing cards by the light of the candles you're here to replace. And the sergeant, a slab-faced man from Fribourg called Brandt, whose French is all corners, looks up and says what he says every night. The little son arrives. The Swiss find this funny every single night. You have decided to find it funny too, because the Swiss also, roughly one night in 4, leave you a heel of bread or a rind of cheese on the corner of the table without comment. The way you'd feed a cat you approved of, and a boy who was invisible everywhere else in the building learns to value the 3 rooms where he has a nickname. The work here is tallow, and tallow is honest, disgusting work. White beeswax upstairs burns clean and smells faintly of honey and costs a fortune. Tallow is rendered animal fat, mutton mostly, beef if you're lucky, and it is what the ledger allots to soldiers, servants and corridors nobody important sees. It burns orange, it gutters, it drips, it stinks of the abattoir when the wick drowns, and it needs constant tending, because a tallow wick doesn't consume itself like wax. It has to be trimmed, snuffed, every half hour or the flame flares up a rope of black smoke and the candle wastes itself in 10 minutes. You set the basket down. Your hands know this next part so well they do it while your mind stands somewhere behind them, watching. Left hand takes the snuffer from your belt. Scissors with little box on one blade. Brass, older than you. The handles worn to the shape of some previous boy's fingers and now reworn to yours. Right hand shields the flame of the first table candle from the draught of the door. Snip. The charred inch of wick falls into the box, not onto the table, never onto the table. A falling ember into spilled wine or a scatter of cards is how you learn what a Swiss sergeant sounds like when he's not being funny. The flame, freed of its dead wick, sits down, steadies, brightens from ragged orange to a clean yellow teardrop. You feel the heat of it on the backs of your fingers, a small specific warmth in the general cold, gone as soon as you move to the next one. 6 candles. Snip, steady, brighten. Snip, steady, brighten. The burned down stubs you dig out of their iron holders with the flat blade. The tallow at the base has pooled and set around the socket like the candle is gripping on for its life, and you lever it, crack it loose, and the cold grease packs under your thumbnail where it will stay, because it always stays. You've not had fully clean thumbnails since April. New candles seat into the sockets with a firm quarter twist. The old stubs go into the stub bag, which lives inside the basket, and which by the end of the night will weigh 4 or 5 pounds and smell like a candle made of old soup. One of the Swiss, a young one, is losing at cards and swearing about it in German. Brant says something that makes the table laugh. On the wall behind them hang their halberds and 2 muskets, and the candlelight moves on the steel, and for a moment the whole room is orange and gold and blue smoke, warm, loud, alive, and you stand there with grease under your nails and let yourself have 3 seconds of it, the way you'd warm your hands. Then you pick up the basket. Nobody says goodbye. The little son leaves. The stair up to the maid's corridor is the one you hate. Not because it's dark. Everything is dark. You carry the dark's antidote in a basket. You've made your peace. You hate it because of the smell at the second turning, and because you know what the smell is. The privies of the Louvre, the actual built privies, are few, distant, and foul beyond describing, and so the palace has evolved a second system, which is any dark corner, any little used stair, any space behind a door that opens against a wall. The second turning of this stair is such a place, has been for years by the look of the stone which is stained in a tide line. Chamber pots get emptied out of windows into the courts below. There's a reason you walk close to walls but not too close, a reason every experienced person in this palace glances up at the facades out of pure reflex. And where there's no window, there's a corner. The finest court in Europe. Music by Lully, ceilings by Romanelli. And the second turning of the maid's stair smells like the alley behind a tavern, and everyone simply lives with it. Ladies gathering their skirts and holding their pomanders to their noses, because the alternative would be to build enough privies, and nobody builds privies when they could build a gallery. You take the turning on held breath like everyone does, and come up into the maid's corridor. Here the work is white wax and delicacy. The corridor serves the lodgings of maids of honour and waiting women, girls and women who orbit the 2 queens, and it is panelled in old wood dry as biscuit, 400 years of seasoning, and hung every few yards with sconces whose brass backplates are there for exactly one reason: to stand between flame and panel. Your instructions, drummed into you by Vachon in your first week with the aid of a stick tapped on your collarbone for emphasis. The candle stands vertical. The wick is trimmed short. The flame's tip clears the top of the backplate by 2 fingers minimum, and you look at the panel behind every sconce, every visit for the brown shadow, the ghost of scorch that says heat has been kissing this wood and will one day get past kissing. You go sconce to sconce. New candle from the basket. The white wax is smooth and cool and faintly slick under your fingers, and it clicks softly against its brothers as you lift it out. Old stub out, quarter twist into the bag. Fingertip test on the backplate. Warm, fine. Fingertip on the panel behind. Cold, good. Trim the wick of the standing candle too along, which some passing person has bent by walking too fast. The draft of a woman's skirts at full sail will lay a flame sideways for a full second, and a full second against dry panelling is not nothing, is never nothing. Behind 3 of the doors along this corridor, light shows at the sill and voices murmur. Behind one, someone is crying quietly, with the particular rhythm of someone who's been crying a while and is tired of it but can't stop. A girl from one of the great families, maybe 15 like you, packed off to court to be seen and placed and married. She has a bed, that girl, a real one, and a fire, and probably 3 of your year's wages in ribbon in a chest at the foot of it. And she is crying in the cold heart of the greatest palace on earth, and you are standing outside her door with grease under your nails, feeling absurdly sorry for her. The Louvre does that. It stacks miseries so strangely that you lose track of whose is heavier. You move on. The Countess's landing is next, and tonight, for once, her woman is not lying in wait, and you swap the door candles, white wax against the ledger, God defend you, in blessed silence, and you are 3 steps into your escape when a door opens behind you and a voice says, "Boy," you turn, become furniture, eyes at collar height. It's not the Countess's woman. It's a man, middle-aged, dressed in good dark cloth, no lace, no sword, a steward or a secretary, upper servant class, the class that terrifies you more than nobles do, because nobles don't know you exist, and this class exists specifically to know you exist. He has a candle of his own in his hand, unlit. "A light," he says. You set down the basket, take out the horn lantern, open its little door. He leans his wick to your flame. In the doubled light, his face is grey and pouched, and his eyes are red-rimmed. A man at the end of a long day inside a longer month, and on his sleeve you notice there is sealing wax and ink on his second finger, driven into the skin. "You're the fruitery boy for this floor," he says. Not a question. He's looking at you the way Renard did. Cataloguing. "Yes, monsieur. You pass the cardinal stare on your rounds?" Your stomach tightens 1 notch. The cardinal. Mazarin. The dying spider at the centre of everything. "I pass beneath it, monsieur. The river corridor." His Eminence's apartments burn lights all night now. All night, every night. The physicians come and go at all hours, and they cannot be received in the dark. He says it evenly, but there's something underneath the evenness, the way there's river under the wall. The allocation is short. The requests go through the proper channels, and the proper channels take 4 days, and monsieur, we do not reliably have 4 days at a time anymore. He looks at your basket. You look at your basket. In it, white wax, counted, ledgered, every stick of it already spoken for, plus 11 candles that exist only because you mortgaged your winter's charcoal. And here is where 7 months of this building speaks through your mouth before your fear can stop it. "The count is exact, monsieur. I can't be short again. I'd be dismissed, and then this floor would be served by a boy who doesn't know which sconces scorch." You let that sit for half a breath. But the stub bag isn't weighed until the grey round. A white wax candle burned 2 hours still has 4 hours in it. If certain stubs were long tonight and found their way to a stair where physicians need light, the bag would be light. And a bag can be light because a boy is clumsy and dropped stubs down a drain. A clumsy boy might be cuffed. He wouldn't be dismissed. The steward looks at you for a long moment. Somewhere down the corridor the crying girl has stopped or moved away from her door. "What's your name?" "Nicolas Perrin, monsieur." "Bernard," he says, secretary to the household of His Eminence. He produces from somewhere in the dark cloth a coin and holds it out. Not a lier, not a sou, a silver piece, a quarter écu, 15 sols, more money than you've held at one time since you arrived. "For the drain," he says, "that eats stubs. There will be one of these each week that the drain stays hungry." And Nicolas Perrin, the red-rimmed eyes come up to yours, and for a second he lets you see how tired he actually is, which is a kind of payment too from a man like this to a boy like you. When His Eminence dies, and he will die, this winter or the next, everything in this building will be recounted. Every ledger, every allocation, every man and boy. The king will take it all into his own hands, they say, so be exact in what's written, and be useful in what isn't. That's the whole science of service. There's no third thing. He goes back through his door with his lit candle, and you stand in the corridor with a silver coin burning in your fist, having just agreed, you realise, to run a small nightly fraud against the King of France on behalf of the household of the First Minister of France, and the truly instructive part, the part you'll chew on for months, is that this is normal. This is how the building works. The Louvre runs on a written system that everyone honours and nobody follows, and a shadow system of stubs, favours, charcoal and silence that nobody honours and everybody follows, and the boys who starve are the boys who only learn one of the two. You put the coin in your shoe. You pick up the basket. The palace clock strikes 11. 1 round mostly done, 3 to go, and the long dogleg to the petite gallery is next, past the north end, where an old flue breathes badly when the wind comes off the river. Tonight, you noticed on the way in, the wind is off the river. The petite gallery at night is the most beautiful place you've ever been allowed to stand, and you are only allowed because someone has to carry the light. You come into it from the south end through a door meant for servants, cut so low you duck without thinking now, and the space opens above you like a held note. It's a long gallery on the upper floor running toward the river, and it is old work, begun under Charles IX and Henri IV, part of it nearly 70 years old now, which in this palace of permanent construction makes it a grandmother. Below it, on the ground floor, the Queen Mother's people have been fitting out her summer apartment for years, gilders and painters scaffolded under new ceilings. But up here, the old gallery keeps its old duty. They call it the Gallery of the Kings because the walls carry them. Portraits of the kings and queens of France, faces in ruffs and armour and ermine receding down the long wall into the dark. A family assembled across centuries watching. Your job here is 8 candles in the standing girandoles, kept burning all night, because a gallery that connects royal apartments is never left black. A black gallery is an invitation, and this building remembers assassins the way you remember winters. You work your way down it, and the kings watch you do it. This is the part of the night you'd never confess to enjoying, because enjoying it isn't yours to do. You're a grease-nailed boy from Beauvais, and this room is a sentence written in a language you can't read. But the candlelight doesn't know that. When you bring a fresh flame up under the portraits, the varnish catches it, and the faces move. Henri IV, the present king's grandfather, murdered in his own coach in his own capital 50 years ago this spring, by a madman with a knife who jumped up on the wheel. The whole country still crosses itself at his name. Henri looks down at you with his beard and his long bourbon nose, and in candlelight, 1 night in 10, you'd swear the eyes have weather in them. Francis I, who started tearing down the old castle to build this one, who bought paintings from Italy including a small dark portrait of a merchant's wife with folded hands that hangs in the royal collection somewhere in this very building and that nobody makes any particular fuss about. Kings in steel, queens in pearls, their faces flattened by fashion into white ovals, their eyes following, their eyes always following. 400 years of the people this building was for, and you, at midnight, alone with all of them snipping wicks. You could stand here. You don't. Detail is the whole of survival. Fresh candles, quarter twist stubs, long stubs tonight. 4 of the longest slid gently into the separate cloth you've folded at the basket's end. His Eminence's physicians will have their light, and the drain will have its alibi, trim, steady, brighten. Your breath fogs faintly. It is cold enough in this gallery tonight that the wax is stiff and the wicks snap rather than bend. cold enough that the gilt on the frames has a bloom of damp. The most beautiful room you've ever stood in is, by any honest measure, a barn. A magnificent, irreplaceable barn, hung with the faces of God's anointed, colder inside than the night outside because stone holds October the way a grudge holds a family. At the north end, before the turn, you stop, and you do the thing you promised Renard. You breathe, eyes closed, mouth open a little, the way you'd taste air in a cellar. Tallow, from your own bag, that's you, ignore it. Cold stone, damp gilt, which has a smell, metallic and faintly sweet, you learned it here. Old canvas and varnish, resiny, like a violin. River through everything, green and low. And under it, right at the floor of your senses, something warm. Not smoke. You couldn't stand before God and call it smoke. It's more like the memory of smoke. Hot dust, the smell of a stone that has been near heat, the smell of the top of a lantern. It's coming, as much as it's coming from anywhere, from the seam where the wall meets the ceiling at the gallery's north end, up where the old flue runs behind the masonry on its way through the roof space. You stand there for a long moment, head tipped back, nose full of maybe. Here is the problem, and it's the same problem it always is, the problem that owns every person of your station in this building. To be wrong in either direction is expensive, and the price is always paid by you. Wake the Suisse on the stair, drag him up here, have him breathe at a cold wall, and you're the fruitery boy who cried fire over a lantern smell and Vachon hears, and the Swiss stop leaving you cheese, and the name follows you, and names down here are load-bearing. Say nothing, and be wrong the other way, and you look down the gallery at 400 years of faces at the long dark shine of the floor, and you make yourself finish the thought, because Renard made you promise with his eyes as much as his words. And all of this is ash by morning, and somewhere in the ash is the question of who passed through last and smelled nothing. The fires are hot tonight, all over the palace. First real cold snap. Every hearth that's allowed to burn is burning. The wind is northwest, off the river. Renard's exact recipe. You compromise the way the powerless always compromise. You decide to be more afraid later. You will pass here again at 2, and again at 4. You mark the smell in your memory the way you'd mark a water stain. Its size, its edges, so you'll know if it grows. And you do one thing more, a small thing, the only thing actually in your power. The girandole nearest the north wall, you move. It stands 2 feet from the panelling. You carry it carefully, all 8 pounds of brass and burning wax, 6 feet farther out into the room, and set it down where a falling candle would find only stone floor. If anyone asks, a draught. There's always a draught. It's the Louvre. The kings watch you do it. None of them object. Most of them, if the stories are true, watch their own palaces burn at one time or another, or burned other people's. They know how it goes. You duck out the low door, and the gallery holds its note behind you in the dark. Down then, and out, into the actual night. Because the torches of the river gate are yours too. And this is the part of the round where the Louvre stops being a building and becomes a weather. The passage door lets you out at the base of the south front, and the wind takes you immediately, a flat, hard push off the Seine, with the whole of the Norman plain behind it. The river is 30 yards away past the quay, black and braided, running with the sound of a crowd heard through a wall. Across the water, the far bank is a low, irregular blackness stitched, with maybe a dozen lit windows. Paris, the biggest city in Europe. 400,000 souls or more, and at midnight it shows you a dozen windows. because light is money, and the city, unlike the palace, counts its own candles. There's no bridge here at the palace itself, but downstream you can see the Pont Neuf carrying its lanterns across the water. The New Bridge, they still call it, though it's 50 years old. The only bridge in Paris with no houses on it. So standing on it, you can actually see the river you're crossing, which Parisians found so novel that the bridge became a permanent fair. Sellers and singers and tooth pullers and pickpockets all day, and at night the lanterns and the bronze horse and rider in the middle. Henri IV again, the murdered grandfather, green-black against the sky, riding nowhere forever. The gate torches live in iron brackets bolted to the stone, head high, and torch work is the crudest work you do and the closest you come to open battle with the elements. A palace torch is a shaft wound with rope and soaked in pitch and tallow, and in this wind it doesn't burn so much as fight. The flame lies out flat, snapping like a flag, tearing off little burning rags of itself that fly 10 feet and die. You bring the new torches under your arm, and the ritual is new torch head to old torch flame. Hold it in the fire's body. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The pitch catches with the sound like a huge indrawn breath. Whoomp! And now you're holding 2 live fires in a wind determined to give them to your coat. Old torch out of the bracket. The iron is hot even through the rag. A bracing, dangerous warmth. The first thing all night that has been too hot instead of too cold. Grind its head against the stone scraper set in the wall for the purpose. Kill it properly. A torch that looks dead and isn't is a folk tale down here. Everyone knows a boy who knew a boy. New torch seated in the bracket, wedged, tested with a shake. Your face, for the 10 seconds you work close, is scorched on one side and river cold on the other, split down the middle like a jester's coat, and your eyes stream from the smoke, and the pitch smell coats the back of your throat, and will still be there at dawn. 2 torches at the river gate, 2 more at the guard postern. The Swiss on gate duty stands in his box like a man bricked into his own cloak and says nothing. But when your second torch catches and the light steadies, he grunts. Once, which from a Swiss on a night wind is a citation for valour. You stand for a moment in the double glow, getting your breath, and you look up at the palace behind you. From down here, at night, it stops being your employer and becomes what it is. The long stone front runs away in both directions, pale grey where the torchlight reaches. Then nothing. Then, high up, the irregular constellation of lit windows. Here a rows of candlelight where someone rich is awake. There the steady row of the king's floor where light is a statement and burns whether anyone reads by it or not. The scale of it presses on you, not beauty exactly. Mass, intention. 450 years of kings deciding over and over that this pile would be added to rather than abandoned, each one leaving his initial carved somewhere, his ceiling, his staircase, his debts. And the thought comes to you, with the wind pushing and your basket dragging your arm and a silver coin in your shoe and grease under your nails. Every one of those lit windows is lit because a boy climbed to it. Not tonight only. Always. 450 years of nights, and every single one of them held back by hands like yours. Boys and porters and old men with scarves, hauling wax and pitch and fear up dark stairs so that the faces in the portraits could be painted by daylight men who never once thought about it. The building is famous. The light is anonymous. That's the deal, and nobody signed it, and it holds. Then a gust puts river spray across the quay, and philosophy is over. You get your basket under the cover of the passage, wipe your streaming eyes with the heel of a pitch-smelling hand, and head in to refill for the second round, because it's coming up on midnight, and midnight is when the palace, which you'd think would be going to sleep, does the opposite. Midnight is when the Louvre shows its second face. Here is what nobody outside the walls understands about the Louvre. The palace does not sleep at night. It only changes what it wants. By day, the building wants order, processions, offices, ceremonies, the clockwork of the royal day. But after midnight, with the king retired and the ceremonies stood down, the Louvre becomes a stone city at carnival. A carnival with the shutters closed, running on wax and wine and steaks that would buy farms. Your second round takes you back up through the south stair, and now the guard room is quieter. Half the Swiss asleep, sitting up, arms folded, chins on chests, sleeping the way soldiers sleep, fully and lightly at once. But 2 floors above, behind the third door of the long corridor, the night is at full boil. That's the apartment of a marquis whose name you know better from the kitchen talk than you'd ever admit, and through the door, as you change the landing candles, comes the sound of serious money, the rattle and slide of dice in a leather cup, the particular silence after the throw, the burst, groans, one high laugh, a chair scraped back hard. They play hoka in there, and lansquenet, games the preachers thunder against and half the court is drowning in. The kitchens say, and the kitchens again know everything, that gentlemen have lost a year of a duchy's income in a night in rooms like that one. That ladies of the highest names play until dawn and pay their debts in ways that make even the kitchens lower their voices. Cardinal Mazarin himself is a famous gambler. The joke, told carefully, is that His Eminence never minded the court's gambling because he so reliably won. The king plays, the queens play, everyone plays, because the nights are long and black and cold, and there are only so many hours a human being can be magnificent, and after that they need to feel something. And in a palace in winter the things on offer are wine, love and hazard is the only one of the 3 that's awake past 2. You service that corridor to the sound of a man's fortune changing through 3 inches of oak. Snip, steady, brighten. The stub from the sconce nearest the door is barely burned. Someone replaced it privately off ledger. They do that when they don't want the timing of their evening legible in the wax. And you weigh it in your palm for a second. 2 hours of good light, and it goes into His Eminence's cloth. The drain grows hungrier, and the alibi grows fatter. And along the corridors between the loud doors, the Louvre's other midnight population lies where it always lies, on the floor. You step over the first of them at the head of the stair. A valet rolled in his master's old cloak stretched across a doorway on a straw mat, dead asleep with his mouth open, positioned exactly where anyone entering must wake him. This is not misfortune, this is his job description. All over the palace, at every important door, human draft stoppers are laid out for the night. Valets across thresholds, pages on fold-away pallets in antechambers, waiting women on truckle beds that slide out from under great beds like drawers. The higher your master, the closer you sleep to his air. There are gentlemen of the bedchamber, actual noblemen, who count it the honour of their year to sleep on a mattress on the floor of the king's own room, listening to the King of France breathe. Nobody has a room of their own. Almost nobody in this entire teeming building, this city of 10,000 souls, has what you would call a room of their own, a door they can close on a space that is theirs. The king himself is never alone. His rising and his going to bed are ceremonies with an audience. His body is dressed and undressed by relay teams of the highest-born men in France, and there are eyes on him, by design, from the moment he wakes. Privacy has not been invented yet. Not really, not here. Solitude is a thing that happens to hermits and the mad. Everyone in this building sleeps in the sound of someone else's breathing, from the anointed of God down to you and Thomas and the rats. And of all of them, only the rats chose their roommates. You step over 3 more sleepers on this corridor alone. One, a page of maybe 13, has slid sideways off his pallet and lies with his cheek flat on stone, and without deciding to, you crouch and shove the edge of the pallet back under his head, because stone in October pulls the heat out of a skull like the river pulls a dropped oar, and he'll wake at the grey hour aching to the bone otherwise. He doesn't stir. His breath smells of wine. Someone gave the boy wine to make the floor softer, is what there is. Down, then, and out across the kitchen court, because the second round includes the service quarter, and the service quarter at midnight is the only honestly warm place in your entire night, and you'd walk it slower if the cold let you walk anything slower. The court between the palace and the kitchen ranges is black and puddled and busy even now. A wood porter passes you bent under a load of faggots for the morning fires, breathing in rhythm with his steps like a man rowing. 2 scullions are out at the trough breaking the skin of ice with a paddle to draw water, and their curses hang in the air in little clouds. From the open door of the great kitchen comes a bar of orange light and a rolling front of heat and smell that you walk into like a wall. Roast fat, onions, smoke, scorched flour, the copper and blood smell of the plucking room, all of it churned together and pushed out into the night by the drawer of chimneys that never fully cool from Michaelmas to Easter. Inside, the night crew is at the long business of tomorrow. The king's dinner at 1 o'clock will be dozens of dishes served in waves, potages, entrees, roasts, entremets, and dozens of dishes begin at midnight. Stocks muttering in copper cauldrons a child could bathe in. A boy your age turning a spit of tomorrow's fowls over banked coals, with his face glazed red and his other arm shielding his eyes. An old woman picking meat from boiled carcasses with fingers that move like knitting. The cooks of the king's mouth work under the same rule you do. Everything counted, everything tasted, everything watched, because the fear of poison is bred into this dynasty's bones. And yet the kitchen has what the gilded floors upstairs cannot buy at any price on earth: heat and enough. Marguerite sees you from the pastry end and jerks her chin, and you go, because when Marguerite jerks her chin, food happens. She's somewhere between 40 and 60, wide as a door from the Auvergne, forearms like a blacksmith and a face like a fist, and she has decided, for reasons never explained, that you are one of hers. Perhaps a son somewhere, perhaps a village boy she once was herself. She doesn't say. She puts into your hands a heel of white bread, white, the crumb like a cloud, the king's own quality, technically a scrap and legally therefore hers to give, and on it a slab of cold roast pork with the fat gone waxy, and a smear of mustard from the pot with her thumb, and she says what she always says: eat it here, nothing leaves. You eat it there. You eat it the way you eat everything now, fast and complete, guarding it with your shoulders without meaning to, and the fat coats your mouth, and the mustard climbs your nose, and the bread is the single finest substance you have encountered in your 15 years, and you think that every time it's true. Every time your back is to a wall of banked ovens. The heat comes through your coat, through your shirt, into the actual muscle of your back, and your shoulders drop an inch from where they've been riding all night, and for 4 minutes chewing in a corner of the king's kitchen with your eyes half shut. You're as close to happiness as your employment allows. Marguerite watches you eat with her arms crossed, satisfied the way people are satisfied watching fires they built. You're on the gallery side tonight, she says. It isn't a question. The kitchen knows everyone's route. The kitchen is the palace's brainstem. Winds turned northwest. Tell your old thief Renard his flue is smoking again. Colin smelled it in the roof space over the north end when he went up at 9 to look at the pigeon traps. Hot dust smell, he said. Nothing to see. The pork stops halfway down your throat and needs help getting the rest of the way. I smelled it too, you say. 11:30. At the ceiling seam, north end. Marguerite's face doesn't change, because Marguerite's face never changes, but she's quiet for a moment, and Marguerite quiet is loud. 2 noses is a fact, she says. 1 nose is a fancy. 2 noses is a fact. You know what stands between a fancy and a fact in this house? Whose mouth it comes out of. She takes the empty rag from your hands, flicks crumbs to the floor for whatever's under the table. Something is always under the table, and looks at you with small, black, unimpressed eyes. The Suisse on the gallery stair tonight is Kessler. Kessler is not a fool. If your nose says it again at 2, you tell Kessler that Colin the roofman smelled it at 9, and the pastry kitchen sent you. You put our names in your mouth, you understand? A boy alone is a fancy. A boy carrying names is a message. And this is how you learn the 3rd rule of the Louvre, standing by the ovens with mustard in your nose. Down here, below the gold, credibility is a thing you assemble out of other people, like a bridge out of planks. Nobody at your level can be believed, but enough of you, lashed together, can be. The clock over the kitchen court strikes 1 as you shoulder back out into the cold with your refilled basket, and the cold, after the ovens, is a bucket of river thrown over your soul. Your eyes water. The sweat you didn't know you'd sweated turns to a cold film under your shirt in the time it takes to cross the court. And by the far door you're shivering, actually shivering, jaw tight, the basket handle jumping a little against your arm. 2nd round, back half, then 2 o'clock, then the gallery again, and your nose, and Kessler, and the names. You didn't know it yet. You couldn't have. But the palace clock striking 1 had just divided your life in half. Everything before this night, and everything after it. And what stood between the 2 halves was 3 hours away, up under the roof of the Gallery of the Kings, breathing quietly in the dark, getting warmer. The back half of the 2nd round is the loneliest stretch of the night. A long circuit of corridors that serve mostly locked and sleeping lodgings. And it's on this stretch every night that your mind slips its rope and goes wandering, and every night it wanders to the same place, because homesickness is a rat too, and it holds territory. Beauvais country, the village, 90 souls, 1 bell, mud that had a calendar of its own. Your father is a wheelwright there, a good one, known 2 parishes in every direction. And your mother had 6 children and buried 3, which in your village made her neither lucky nor unlucky, just ordinary. And there is a particular sound she made, a soft click of the tongue against the teeth when she was working and content, that you would trade the silver in your shoe to hear for 1 minute tonight. You are in the Louvre because of a chain of exactly 3 links. Your priest had a cousin. The cousin was a widow in Paris who let rooms near Saint-Germain-l'Auxerrois, the parish church that stands directly opposite the palace's east front, so close its bell and the palace clock argue about the hour all day. and the widow's late husband had been a supplier of wicking to the royal fruitery for 11 years, and his name still opened a particular door a crack, and through that crack in the spring of 1660 they pushed you. You remember your first sight of Paris with your whole body, the way you remember falling out of a tree once. The road from the north comes over the hill at Montmartre, and the city below was not a city as your head understood cities. It was a smoke, a grey-brown, breathing smoke pinned to the earth by 10,000 roofs, with the towers of Notre Dame standing up out of it like the horns of something submerged, and the smell reached you a mile before the walls did. Everyone says that about Paris, and everyone is right. Fish, smoke, tanneries, mud, horses, humanity. A smell with foundations, a smell you could rent a room in. You cried a little, walking down toward it, and told yourself it was the wind. And you arrived, as it happened, in the most feverish spring the city had known in a generation, because the king was getting married, and Paris was preparing to lose its mind. You caught the fever's edge yourself that first summer, before you understood anything. The wedding itself happened far away in the south, at Saint-Jean-de-Luz on the Spanish border in June. The King of France marrying the King of Spain's daughter, Marie-Thérèse, sealing the peace after a war that had run longer than your entire life. 25 years of it, give or take. France and Spain grinding each other like millstones, and the peace signed at last on an island in a border river, and the marriage was the wax on the seal. All spring and summer the court was gone south, and the Louvre stood half empty, and you learned your corridors in a hushed building while Paris outside hammered and sawed and painted, building triumphal arches out of timber and plaster made to look like eternal marble, because the king would bring his bride home at the end of August, and the city would give them an entry such as no one living had seen, and no one living had. You were there. 26th of August, 1660. You will be telling it until you die, and we'll get there, I promise. It's waiting for us at the end of this night like dawn is. But hold it for now the way you held it then, folded away, because the night rounds don't care what you saw in August. What the night rounds taught you through that first summer and autumn was the shape of your new life, and the shape was this. You had joined the largest household on earth, and the household was a machine for making one man's day magnificent, and the machine ran on the totally consumed lives of everyone inside it. The royal households, the kings, the 2 queens, the king's brothers, employ thousands upon thousands between them, officers of the mouth and the chamber and the stables and the chapel, ushers, porters, musicians, physicians, apothecaries, tapestry keepers, clock keepers, mole catchers. There is a royal mole catcher, this is true. He has wages and a title. Down through the kitchens and cellars and woodyards to the boys, everything is bought as an office and held as property. Men pay fortunes for the right to hand the king his shirt, because the right to hand the king his shirt can be parlayed into everything else on earth. And at the bottom, beneath the offices, beneath the property, is the stratum that is simply hired and simply worked. You. Your wages are small and late. The household's finances are a permanent gentle catastrophe, and wages run a quarter or 2 behind as a matter of course, which is why the shadow economy of stubs and scraps and charcoal isn't a corruption of the system. It is the system, the part that actually pays. You are fed, in theory, from the tables of leftovers that cascade down the household. The king's untouched dishes feed his officers, whose leavings feed theirs down and down, a waterfall of cooling food with you at the splash. and in practice you are fed because Margaret jerks her chin. You are clothed in what you brought plus what you've traded for. You are warmed by whatever you stand near, and you sleep, when the rounds end, in the grey, in the room over the north kitchen court, which is where the back half of the second round finally brings you past at 1:30, and where you stop as you do every night for the length of 10 breaths at the foot of the ladder stair listening. Above you, in the dark, your 3 roommates sleep the sleep of the worked. Gregoire, 17, a woodyard boy who snores like a cart on a bad road. Petit Jean, 16, of the scullery, who talks in his sleep in the long of his home country far in the south. Arguments and prices, always arguments and prices. And Thomas, 12, the one from Anjou, 8 months here, the one the rats walk over, the one who cries with his fist in his teeth. Tonight Thomas isn't crying. Tonight you can hear from the foot of the stair. Thomas is doing something worse. He is awake. You know the sound of a boy pretending to sleep, the breathing too even with a snag in it, like cloth catching a nail, because you were that boy in May. You should keep walking. The round is the round. The fruitery does not pay you to nurse scullions. You climb the ladder stair. The sleeping room is a low loft, and warm. Actually warm. Its floor is the ceiling of the bakehouse, and the ovens below hold their heat till morning, and this is the entire and only luxury of your position. The thing boys in colder lofts envy you for, and it comes with the rent of rats, because the warmth that draws you draws them, and the flour store is next door, and the drain runs below, and your loft is the crossroads. In the light of your working candle, 4 pallets of straw, a row of pegs, a shuttered gap of a window, and the black quick movement at the edge of the light that you don't even register anymore. That is simply the texture of the room, the way the river is the texture of the south corridors. Thomas's eyes are open, shining in the candlelight fixed on the roof beam. They took the bread, he says, without looking at you. His voice is very level, the level of a boy holding a voice down with both hands. I saved a piece under the straw, from supper, for the morning. They took it out from under the straw while I was lying on it. I felt them do it. You crouch by his pallet. Up close he smells of scullery, grease, sand, and lye. The lye that's cracked his hands, 12-year-old hands with old man knuckles, split at every fold, because the scullery scrubs the king's coppers with sand and ash lye in cold water, 16 hours a day, and skin can only file so many grievances before it quits. You can't bank bread in the straw, you say. You know that now. Straw belongs to them. Everything at floor level after dark belongs to them. That's the tax. You reach into your coat. The Swiss left cheese tonight. You'd forgotten it till your hand found it. You put the rind in his cracked hand and close the fingers over it. Pockets, you say. Hung on the peg, coat over it. They don't climb the pegs if the wall's clear. Now eat it and stop feeding on yourself. You'll wake Gregoire, and Gregoire woken is worse than rats. Thomas eats the rind exactly like you ate the pork. Fussed, shoulders in. Then he says at the roof beam, so quietly it barely makes it out of his mouth, "At home we had a dog slept across my feet." And there is nothing to say to that, so you don't. You stay crouched there a minute, one knee complaining on the boards, listening to the bakehouse warmth tick in the floor and in the wall, the wet grain rustle of the other residents going about their commerce, and you think, you cannot help thinking, of the phrase the woodyard men use, the joke old as the building, the one that isn't a joke, the rats sleep better than the king, and they do. It's not even close, and it's not about the straw. The King of France sleeps in state, behind balustrades, on down, under gold. and he sleeps observed, in a room with other breathing men, in a palace he doesn't love, in a city he doesn't trust, 12 years after that city chased him out of his own bed, 10 years old, into the winter dark. The kitchen say the young king forgets nothing. The kitchen say he means to build his way out of this whole stone argument some day, out where there's no Paris pressing on the walls. Meanwhile, Thomas's tormentors, 3 feet away in the wainscot, sleep in a nest of stolen wool, warm, fed, unledgered, unafraid, at the exact centre of the greatest concentration of wealth and power in the Western world, taking their cut of it nightly, answering to no one. Nobody in this building sleeps well except the ones who owe it nothing. You stand, knee-cracking, and pick up the basket because it is 1:45, and the gallery is waiting, and your nose has an appointment. "Nicholas," Thomas says as your head drops below the floor line, "is it always like this?" You could lie. The lie would even be kind. "It gets smaller," you say instead, which is true. It doesn't get better. It gets smaller. You get bigger. Go to sleep. You take the ladder down into the cold, and the cold takes you back like a creditor. The 2 o'clock round begins like every round. The fruitery store, the refill, the count. The store is a vaulted room smelling of honey and mutton fat, wax on one side, tallow on the other, torches racked like weapons, and the night issue book chained to its desk under a lamp. You count out your allocation with cold, clumsy fingers. The white wax sticks click. The tallow sticks land with a duller, greasier knock. And you enter the figures yourself in the rough column, which Vachon will transcribe fair in the morning with his thumb running down the sides of your stubs. The 11 ransom candles from Renard have long since dissolved into the night's arithmetic. The cardinal's cloth of long stubs rides at the basket's end, heavier now. On paper, your night is exact. Under the paper, your night is a small congress of frauds, holding hands. "There's no third thing," Bernard said. "You're starting to believe there's no first thing either. There's only the second thing, wearing the first thing's coat. Out. Up. The palace at 2 is at its lowest ebb. Even the gambler's corridor has gone from roar to murmur, the dice cup resting, the losses being contemplated. And the cold has moved from the air into the stone, into the deep masonry, the way it does in the smallest hours, so that the whole building becomes one continuous cold object with you moving through it like the one warm fault. Your feet have passed through aching into a state you privately call wooden saint. You feel them the way you would feel someone else's feet, reported to you from a distance. Your right hand has claimed the warm side of the lantern and will not negotiate with the left. Under your coat, your shirt has dried to a stiff, cold second skin. 15 years old, 4 hours of stairs behind you, 4 hours ahead, and this is Tuesday, and there will be a Wednesday, and this is simply what a body is for in the world as constituted. You have stopped expecting anyone to be surprised by it, including you. You come up the low door into the petite gallery, and before your eyes adjust, your nose has already gone ahead of you down the dark and come back, and what it says stops you with 1 foot still on the threshold. Smoke. Not maybe. Not the memory of smoke. Smoke. Thin. Dry. Woody. With a bitter edge of scorched dust and something mineral behind it. Hot stone, hot iron. Riding at the top of the gallery's cold air the way cream rides on milk. Faint. If you'd never smell this room clean, you might walk the length of it and call the smell candles an age. But you have a map of this room in your nose, 1130's map, and against that map the north end has changed, grown. The stain has spread past its edges. Your 8 candles in the girandoles are burning exactly as you left them, small and upright and innocent, 40 feet of dark between each pool of light, and above the last pool, at the north end, where the wall meets the ceiling, the seam you breathed at 3 hours ago. You make yourself walk down there. The kings watch you come. Your footsteps are the only footsteps, and the gallery takes each one and hands it up and down its length, 60, 70 paces of polished dark, with your heart getting louder in your own ears the whole way, and you stop under the seam and look up and see nothing. Nothing. No glow, no haze in the candlelight, no breath of movement. Just old stone and old gilt and the painted dark. The building looks back at you with a straight face, but the smell up here is double what it is at the door, and when you lick your finger and hold it high, the air at the ceiling is moving, crawling slow as syrup toward the north wall being drawn. Something up there is breathing in, and now comes the moment you will return to for the rest of your life. The hinge, the 2 or 3 seconds in the dark under the kings with your finger in the air, because everything in you that the Louvre has spent 7 months building says, wait, be sure, be more sure. The whole architecture of your survival is built on not being the boy who was wrong, and you are about to go wake a Swiss guard, who will have to decide whether to wake an officer, who will have to decide whether to wake a gentleman, who will have to decide whether to wake, up and up, a ladder of men, each risking his standing on the word of the man below, and at the bottom of the entire ladder, holding it, a 15-year-old fruitery boy's nose. Then you think of Renard's finger pointing at the brazier, filed, and Marguerite. 2 noses is a fact, and you think, this is the thought that actually moves your feet, you'll remember this. You think of the size of the fire in the bakehouse ovens, banked, tame, and of how far below your sleeping roommates it burns, and how warm it keeps them anyway, through a floor. Heat travels. Heat is patient. Somewhere above this ceiling, inside the roof of the Gallery of the Kings, heat has been travelling patiently all night, and every hearth in the palace is stoked against the first cold snap, and the wind is northwest, and it is 2 o'clock in the morning, the hour when everyone who might smell what you smell is asleep. You run. You run down the Gallery of the Kings with your basket banging against your leg, wax clattering, stub bag swinging, past Henri IV and Francis I and all the flattened queens, your footsteps no longer polite, the gallery hurling the noise back and forth, and you take the low door without ducking enough and pay for it with a white crack across the crown of your head that you will not even feel until dawn, and you come out onto the landing of the north stair where the Suisse of the watch stands with a lantern at his feet. And Kessler, Margaret said. Kessler is not a fool. He is already turning toward the noise of you with a hand moving to the halberd against the wall. Smoke, you say. It comes out ragged. You put your hands on your knees, drag one breath, come up again, and you do it the way Marguerite built it for you. Plank by plank, names first. The pastry kitchen sent word. Colin the roofman smelled hot dust in the gallery roof space at 9 tonight. I smelled it at 11:30 at the north seam. It's twice as strong now at 2, and the air at the ceiling is drawing toward the north wall. Renard, the garde meuble, has reported that flew 2 winters running. Monsieur, the fires are high tonight and the wind is off the river. There is something alight or near alight in the roof of the petite galerie. Kessler is perhaps 40, grey at the temples, with the stillness of a man who has stood at doors for 20 years, and he does the thing you will love the Swiss for until your dying day. He does not ask you if you're sure. He picks up the lantern, crosses the landing in 3 strides, puts his own head through the low door and breathes. 1 breath, too. In the lantern light you can see his nostrils actually working like a hound's. Then he comes back out and his face has not changed, but his voice has dropped into a register you haven't heard from him before. Flat and fast, the parade ground turned inside out. You. Down to the guardroom, south stair, tell Sergeant Brandt, Kessler says feu couvert, covered fire, roof of the petite gallery, north end. He's to send the water party up the north stair and a runner to the Maréchal des Logis. Say it back. You say it back. Feu couvert. Water party, north stair. Runner to the Maréchal des Logis. Then the garde meuble, your renard. He knows the flue. He can tell the officers where in the roof to break so they don't tear up the whole ceiling of the king's looking for it. Then you come back here with your basket because... And here Kessler looks at you, and something passes over the granite that is almost, not quite, a smile. Because we are about to have a great many men working in a great deal of dark, and you, little son, are the light. And that is the moment the fear in your chest changes shape. It doesn't leave, it will not leave for hours, but it changes shape. From the fear of being wrong into the fear of being needed, which is heavier and cleaner at the same time, like the difference between tallow and wax. You go down the north stair 3 steps at a stride, past a sleeping valet who jerks awake and swears, along the river corridor where the Seine breathes cold through the wall, and behind you, above you, faint through the floors, you hear the sound that means the ladder of men has begun to climb itself, a door banging open, a voice pitched to carry, boots. The Louvre has stood for 450 years. It has survived English kings, mad kings, murdered kings, siege, plague, riot, and the permanent slow riot of its own construction. Nearly every part of it that has ever died has died the same way. Fire. Fire is the palace's one native predator, the thing it actually fears. A building of dry ancient timber roofs over stone packed with open flame, tapestry, canvas, wax and sleeping people, defended by buckets. Everyone who lives here knows a fire story. In a few months, though you cannot know this tonight. This very gallery's neighbour, the great ceiling where the court watched ballets, will burn in a single evening, paintings and gods and all, and the court will stand in the snow of the courtyard and watch 100 years of glory go up the winter sky as sparks. Fires happen here. Fires are always about to happen here, but not tonight. Tonight, between the fire and the gallery of the kings, there is a chain of exactly 5 links. A mason who cheated, a clerk nobody read, a roofman checking pigeon traps, a pastry cook who trusts facts, and a boy with grease under his nails who breathed in the right place twice. You burst into the guardroom of the south stair and 6 Swiss come up out of sleep like one animal, and you open your mouth and the night catches fire, the good way, the human way, around you. What happens in the next hour you will spend years trying to describe to people who weren't there, and you will always fail in the same place. The noise. Everyone imagines a fire alarm in a palace as bells and screaming. It isn't. A covered fire, caught early, in the smallest hours, sounds like furniture, like an enormous house being moved by angry men. Boots in numbers on stone, the bang and drag of doors and ladders, the slosh and knock of full leather buckets carried at a jog, orders in 2 languages pitched low and hard, because the one thing everyone above Sergeant agrees on without discussing it is that the court must not wake. A palace panic in the dark, 10,000 people on black staircases, would kill more than most fires. So the whole battle is fought in a kind of furious quiet, a whispering thunder, and you are in the middle of it holding up light. Brant takes your message with his eyes still crusted with sleep and is issuing orders before you finish saying it back. Feu couvert are the two words that do it. You watch the words go into him like a key into a lock. The water party forms out of nothing. 8 men, buckets from the racks by the door, leather buckets, tarred, heavy as sin, even empty, and the file of them pounds up the north stair behind you, with the buckets knocking their thighs, while a 9th man peels off at a dead run toward the lodgings of the Maréchal des Logis, and a 10th toward the pumps in the kitchen court, where there is a cistern and a hand engine, a squat brass thing on a sled that everyone calls the Toad, and nobody has seen work twice in a row. You detour 6 steps to hammer on Renard's door, and the old man opens it so fast you understand he sleeps in his scarf, upright, half listening, the way the building itself sleeps. And when you say the flue, the north end, they need to know where to break. Something happens in his ruined face that you will only understand years later. Vindication and horror arriving together. 2 winters of filed reports standing up at once. He is pulling on a coat that predates the rain as you turn away, and his voice follows you down the corridor, cracked and carrying, "The 3rd bay. Tell them the 3rd bay from the north wall above the cornice, west side. Don't let them break the ceiling of the kings, it's the west side." Up. The gallery again, but the gallery transformed. Doors at both ends stand open, lanterns swing and multiply down its length, and the roof hatch, a thing you never knew existed, a trap in the ceiling of the little turning stair at the north end, is open, with the ladder through it, and men's legs disappearing up into the dark like the building swallowing them. Kessler has your shoulder before you've caught your breath, and then you are climbing the ladder yourself, basket handed up after you, because it is exactly as he said. The roof space of the petite gallery is a low black attic the length of a tilting yard, and the men in it are half blind, and you are the light. You come up through the hatch into the smell, and the smell up here is no longer a question. Smoke lies under the roof in a shallow inverted lake, lapping around the great oak trusses, stinging, resinous, and through it your lantern and the others cut yellow shafts full of swirling dust and soot flakes, and the space is a forest of black timber, rafters, purlins, braces, 400 years of carpentry crowded down over your head so that even you must stoop, and the Swiss are bent double, moving at a crouch along the boarded walkway with their buckets, swearing softly and continuously in German. And somewhere ahead, at the 3rd bay from the north wall west side, there is a sound, a small sound, the worst small sound you know, the sound of the guardroom hearth on a quiet night, the intimate domestic contented tick and whisper of burning. The flue rises through the roof space as a shaft of brick, and where it passes the 3rd bay, the brick has been shouldered for 2 centuries by a great oak wall plate, the cheap mason's shortcut, timber bearing on chimney, the thing every honest builder in France knows not to do, and the wood there is not aflame. It's worse. It has been cooking for hours, for winters maybe, charring from the inside, and tonight, with every fire below stoked high, and the wind pulling the flue hard, it has crossed over. Along 10 feet of blackened plate, seams of orange breathe in the dark, brightening when the draught inhales, dimming when it exhales, the whole timber pulsing gently like a thing with a heartbeat. Tendrils of smoke rise off it and flatten against the roof boards 18 inches above. Roof boards, dry as the maid's panelling, and above the boards, lead? and under the lead, the night wind ready to feed. An officer has arrived from somewhere, half-dressed, boots and shirt and sword belt over nothing. A gentleman of the guard with his hair wild, and he takes one look and makes the decision that saves the gallery. The decision Renard climbed 40 years of stairs to be able to shout up through the hatch, not water first. Water on a deep char in a confined roof makes steam and spectacle, and drives fire along the grain. First starve it and strip it, axes, and so you spend the strangest hour of your life braced in the third bay of the roof of the Gallery of the Kings, holding your lantern and 2 borrowed ones at the angles men shout for, while Swiss guards in shirt sleeves attack a burning beam 18 inches under the roof of the Louvre with hand axes at a crouch in choking smoke, in near silence. Everything is texture and weight and heat. The axemen work in relays 2 at a time, short furious strokes because there's no room to swing, and the chips that fly off the plate are burning, actual burning fragments spinning through the lantern light. And behind the axemen crouch 2 men with wetted sacking who smother each chip where it lands, stamp, press, twist like men killing scorpions. The smoke thickens with the work. You tie your neck rag over your mouth and nose, and it helps the way a straw roof helps in a flood. Your eyes pour, your arms holding the lanterns high and steady. Steady, boy, they shout, and you make them steady. Pass through burning into a bright singing numbness. The heat off the open char reaches you in waves, dry and intimate, pressing on your face like a palm each time the axes bite through to live ember. And each time, the orange light of the beam's interior throws every man's shadow huge and crooked across the smoke, across the trusses, a cave of giants. They cut it out of the building. That's the whole of it, said plainly. They amputate. 10 feet of wall plate, opened, quartered, levered off the brick with bars. And when the long central piece comes free at last, it comes all at once. 100 pounds of scorched oak with a glowing heart, and 4 men receive it onto soaked sacking like a body. And it is passed man to man at a crouch down the walkway, hissing against the wet cloth, and lowered by rope through the hatch. And only then does the water go to work. Bucket after bucket passed up the ladder hand to hand from a chain of men that now stretches, you'll learn later, all the way down the north stair and across the court to the cistern. The toad, true to form, seized at the 4th stroke. Bucket after bucket into the cavity, over the brick, along the neighbouring timbers, until the 3rd bay steams like a laundry, and the char sighs and goes black and stays black. The officer makes them wait then. This is the discipline that separates men who have fought fire from men who have read about it. The beam is out, the water is in, everyone's blood is roaring for the story to be over, and he makes them wait. A full turn of the glass, watching the black for orange. Feeling the brick with bare palms, because covered fire is a liar and everyone here knows a boy who knew a boy. You wait too, sagging at last against a truss with the dead lanterns at your feet and one live one on your knee, and your body, given a stationary minute, submits its accounts. The crown of your head, the low door, throbbing, both arms trembling in slow waves, hands cramped into lantern hooks. A burn you never felt happen, small and neat as a wax seal on the back of your right wrist. Your throat a chimney in its own right. Around you the Swiss sit back on their heels in the steam and the settling smoke, black-faced, wet, enormous, and one of them, the young card player, the one who was losing, looks over at you and says something in German to the others, and the word son is in it. Son. and the black faces crack white here and there, and Brant arriving huge through the hatch to inspect, hears it, snorts, and delivers the verdict that will follow you around the guard rooms for as long as you serve in this building. "The little son," he says in his cornered French, nudging your foot with his boot, "smelled the big one coming. It isn't eloquent. Neither are you. You sit in the roof of the Gallery of the Kings at 3:30 in the morning, 15 years old, shaking, scorched, wax-fingered, stub-bagged, quarter-ecued, and you start appallingly to laugh, silently, into your neck rag, shoulders going, tears cutting clean channels down the soot. And nobody minds, because half of them are doing it too, or near it. It's what the body does with the fire it beat. You'll learn that tonight, and never unlearn it. Below, through the open hatch, the Gallery of the Kings breathes cold, clean air up at you, and the kings hang in their long, dark, unburned, unbothered, faces turned as ever toward the room, and if any of them notice that the roof over their painted heads spent tonight deciding whether to become weather, they keep it, as they keep everything, behind the varnish. It will be days before you piece together the whole shape of what you were part of, from kitchen talk and guard talk and one astonishing conversation with Renard, who is briefly, hilariously, insufferably famous below stairs. The official account such as filters down, a defect of an old flue discovered by the vigilance of the watch, remedied without loss. The Maréchal des Logis is commended. The watch is commended. No lace-cuffed report will contain the words Colin, Marguerite, Renard, Kessler, or Nicola. The ladder of names climbs out of the paperwork exactly where it climbed out of the dark, which is to say, below the floor where things are written down. But the shadow ledger, the real one, the one kept in heads below stairs, records it all and pays in its own coin. The Swiss guard rooms are warm to you now in a way that has nothing to do with braziers. Margaret, told the story by 3 people before you can tell it yourself, jerks her chin at you that next evening and hands you, without one word, a whole small pie, yours, entire, nothing leaves, and then makes you eat it there anyway, arms folded so she can watch. Renard extracts your charcoal debt to the last measure and forgives nothing, and also, some weeks on, when the cold gets serious, there is suddenly unexplained a second blanket on your pallet, horse-smelling, thick as turf, and when you try to thank him he looks at you as if you've begun speaking Spanish, and speaks of linens. And Bernard, the grey secretary. Bernard hears of it too, because Bernard's trade is hearing of things, and the next time the coin changes hands at the Countess's landing, he holds it back a moment between 2 ink-stained fingers and looks at you with those red-rimmed cataloguing eyes and says, "A boy who can be believed. Do you know, Nicolas Perrin, what that is worth in this building?" And answers himself, dropping the silver into your palm, "More than wax. All that is coming, but it hasn't come yet. Right now there is only the roof space emptying man by man down the ladder, and the officer's hand briefly, absently on your head as he passes, the gesture you'd give a dog, and you will treasure it for a year. And then the long climb down and the gallery, and your abandoned basket sitting primly where you dropped it by the low door, wax spilled like scattered bones, and the palace clock muffled and bronze and unimpressed striking 4. 4 o'clock. The grey round is at 5. Because here is the thing about the machine, the thing you fully understand for the first time tonight, sitting on the gallery floor picking up spilled candles with a burned wrist, while the smell of wet char drifts down through a hole in the ceiling of the King's, the machine does not stop to be grateful. The dinner at 1 o'clock is already being cooked. The stubs must still be weighed. The king will wake at his hour, and his rising will be attended, and the candles of the grey round must be snuffed and gathered exactly as if the night had been a night like any other, because as far as the floors above are concerned it was. That is what all of you are for. You are the reason their nights are all alike. You get up off the floor of the most beautiful room you've ever been allowed to stand in. Everything hurts in the specific inventory of a night you'll remember forever. You pick up the basket. The little sun goes back on its rounds. The grey round is the round nobody imagines when they imagine a palace, and it is, on ordinary nights, your favourite, and this morning it is something more than that. It is the round where you put the night away. It begins in full dark at 5, and it ends in daylight, and in between you walk the whole route in reverse, and instead of bringing fire you take it. Snuff her out, candle by candle, sconce by sconce, room by room, you go through the Louvre extinguishing the night, the little brass box closing over each flame with a soft breath. Tick, a curl of smoke, the dark rushing back in behind you like water behind a boat, and you collect the stubs, and the stub bag grows heavy and foul, and the palace around you performs the strangest transformation you know. It wakes from the bottom up. The kitchens never slept, but at 5 they change pitch. The night crew's long mutter becomes the day crew's clatter. Fires roared up from their banks, the first trains of provisions rumbling in through the service gates from the markets, fish glittering in baskets straight off the night boats, blood-warm bread in towers, crates of live fowl complaining about the schedule. In the courts, the wood porters begin the day's 1,000 hearths. Water carriers file in from the river fountains with their yokes and pails, because this immense building, like every building in Paris, drinks by the bucketful hauled on shoulders. Sweepers move down the galleries ahead of the day like the tide going out, pushing before them the rack of the palace's night, dropped playing cards, a torn glove, chicken bones, a dead lapdog's ribbon, wax, everywhere the spatters and pools and pearls of wax, last night's light gone solid, to be scraped and gathered and, of course, weighed. And as you climb from floor to floor, snuffing, the waking climbs with you, rank by rank. In the corridors, the doorway sleepers are rolling up their pallets, folding themselves back into servants. Behind the doors, the sounds of fires being lit and shutters unshuttered, the first bells for the first masses, the palace chapel, and across the street the great bells of Saint-Germain-l'Auxerrois wading in, the parish bell of kings, the bell that has rung over this ground since before the Louvre had its name. Ladies' maids hurry past you with jugs of warmed water pressed to their chests like infants. A hairdresser actually runs holding his combs, because some countess's levee waits for no man. The gambler's corridor is silent at last, sleeping its expensive sleep. In the maid's corridor, the crying girl's door stands open as her chamberwoman airs it, and you glimpse, in passing, a bed heaped with more pillows than your village owns, and the girl herself at the window in a fur-lined morning gown, looking down into the court with her chin on her hand, her face rinsed clean and blank the way faces are before the day's masks go on. And she's not crying now. She's simply looking out, the way you'd look out of anything you were inside of. You snuff her corridor's sconces one by one, and by the last one you don't need them. The windows have gone from black to iron to ash to pearl. And then, because your route's last leg runs along the upper south corridor, you're given as you are given every clear morning the thing you would never trade away, the thing that makes the whole wooden-cent night worth its aches. You get to watch dawn take Paris. The corridor's east windows look down the river, and you allow yourself. The grey round is unwatched, the one slack hour of the machine. 1 minute at the middle window, basket at your feet, forehead almost to the cold glass. The Seine comes up out of the dark first, a long pewter blade laid through the city, steaming faintly, already crowded. Barges of hay and wine and stone dropping down on the current, ferrymen crabbing across it, the watermills under the bridges beginning their day-long argument with the river. Then the bridges themselves, the Pont Neuf with its lanterns going pale, its bronze king black against the silver, already sprouting its daily fare of sellers and idlers. And upstream the Pont au Change and the Pont Notre Dame carrying their entire streets of tall houses out over the water, chimneys smoking above the current, a thing you didn't believe until you saw it. Houses on bridges, whole laves suspended over the river on stone hoops, then the city entire rising out of its own smoke, the island like a ship moored midstream, Notre Dame's towers taking the first light flat on their faces, and beyond and around roofs, 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 slate and tile and thatch, a frozen brown-grey sea of them running to every horizon, pricked with 100 steeples, and over it all the morning smoke of 100,000 new-lit fires climbing straight up in the still air, like the city was a field of candles just snuffed, still trailing their souls. 400,000 people, maybe more, nobody has counted, nobody could. The biggest city in Christendom waking up all at once, and you at a window above it with a bag of its previous night on your shoulder. 7 months ago the sight terrified you. It has not stopped being terrifying. It has only also become yours. The way the smell map of the gallery is yours, the way the third stair's tide line and Marguerite's chin and Brandt's joke are yours. You know now which smoke is the fish market and which is the tanneries. You know the bells apart. Down there is the widow's house where you slept your first night in Paris on a borrowed mattress, listening to the city grind, certain you would be dead or home by Michaelmas. It is past Michaelmas. You are neither. Behind you, deep in the building, a change moves through the air. Not a sound exactly, more a tightening, the palace drawing itself up. And you know without any clock what it is, because the whole machine turns over on this moment the way the day turns on dawn. The king is waking. You will never see it. That has to be said plainly, because it's the whole grammar of your life. The ceremony beginning now on the floor above and along the wing, the curtains of the great bed drawn back, the first entree, the princes and great officers admitted in their strict waves to watch a young man of 22 be washed and dressed and prayed over. The shirt passed hand to hand along a chain of the noblest blood in France as if the shirt itself were holy. All of that is as invisible to you as your stub bag is to them. 2 worlds, 1 building, laced through each other everywhere and touching nowhere, like the palace and the rats. But standing at your window, you know it is happening. And here is the strange thing, the thing you couldn't have explained to your father with his mouth full of pegs. You feel the building organize itself around that waking. Feel 10,000 lives come into alignment like filings around a lodestone. The fires lit for him, the fish bought for him, the wax counted for him, the beam cut burning out of the roof for him, or at least in his name, over his grandfather's portrait. and you understand that you've spent this whole night inside the workings of an idea. That's what the Louvre is, not a house. An idea 450 years old, made of stone and wax and boys, asserting every single night against the dark and the cold and the fire and the river that one man's day shall be glorious, whatever it costs, and it costs everything, and it is paid nightly by people whose names the idea will never learn. The rats, of course, believe in no ideas. That's their whole advantage. That's why they sleep. The last light of your night is your own working candle, burned down to a thumb's width in its tin holder. You snuff it against the windowsill, tick, and the grey round is over, and the day officially is allowed. You carry the stub bag down to the fruitery store through a building now roaring with morning, and Vachon is at his desk, and Vachon runs his thumb down your stubs, everyone, and weighs the bag and enters the figures and finds the count. You stand very still, exact. He looks at you a moment over the scale. Vachon is a dry, pouched, ledger-coloured man, and it is entirely possible, the room being small and the palace being the palace, that he already knows every single thing that happened tonight, from the 11 candles to the cardinal's stubs to the axework in the third bay, and that his thumb and his scale and his silence are their own kind of message. What's written is exact. What isn't written is yours. Go to bed. Grey round complete, he says to the ledger. Sundown, 4:30 tomorrow, don't be late. Tomorrow, meaning today, meaning 10 hours from now, minus mass, minus food, minus the mending your coat now needs at the shoulder. This whole night begins again, and again after that, world without end, and the honest truth. You're too tired for anything but honest truths. They're all that's left standing. The honest truth is that the thought doesn't crush you the way it would have crushed the boy who walked down from Montmartre in the spring. The night is enormous, but you have learned its rooms. You climb the ladder stair into the bakehouse warmth. Grégoire is gone to the woodyard, Petit-Jean to his sands and lies. Thomas's pallet is empty, and you notice, and something in your chest goes soft and fierce at once. His coat hangs on the peg with the lump in the pocket, off the floor, wall clear below it, exactly as taught. In the wall, the residents are quiet. Their working night is done too. You lie down in your clothes on the straw, with the burn on your wrist reporting in steadily like a small hot coal, and the crown of your head throbbing at half your heartbeat, and your feet returning to you at last from their long distance, pins and needles, and then plain, honest pain, and the smell of scorched oak still living in your hair, and below you, through the floor, the great banked heat of the king's ovens, rising up around your body like a tide coming in. The palace roars faintly above and around you, 10,000 lives at full day. You sleep like a rat, and as sleep takes him, takes you, the mind does what tired minds do at the threshold. It opens the one drawer it keeps for gold and lifts out the day it will still be describing on its deathbed. So come back 2 months while the boy sleeps. Come back to the 26th of August, 1660, the day Paris stopped being a city and became a single living creature with 400,000 eyes, all of them pointed at one road. The king is bringing home his bride. Understand first what this meant, because it wasn't a parade. Nobody alive had a word big enough for what it was. For 25 years, longer than most Parisians could remember being alive, France and Spain had been at war. A whole generation had grown up, married and died with that war as weather. Taxes for the war, sons for the war, bread priced by the war. And now it was over. Signed the autumn before on a neutral island in a river on the far southern border, in a pavilion built exactly half in France and half in Spain, so that neither king would have to stand in the other's country. And the peace was sealed the way peaces between crowns are sealed, with a girl, Marie-Thérèse, Infanta of Spain, daughter of the enemy, married to Louis in June in a border town smelling of the sea. All summer the pair of them had processed home through France at the speed of ceremony, and Paris had spent that summer building. You watched the building happen on your rare free hours with your mouth open. The city raised triumphal arches at the gates and along the route, timber and plaster and canvas, but carved and painted and gilded to read as eternal marble. Mountains of allegory, peace with her olive, France and Spain clasping hands, Hercules, who was somehow also the king, obelisks, trophies, Latin by the yard. Whole facades along the route disappeared behind tapestries. By ordinance, every householder on the way had to hang the front of his house, and the competition to outhang the neighbours emptied every tapestry chest in the city. Windows along the route rented for fortunes. A good window on the Rue Saint-Antoine went for more than your year's wages, and scaffolding seats rose against the houses like siege works, and men sold places on rooftops, on walls, in trees. The court had a word for the whole apparatus of that day, the entrée, the joyous entry. Kings had made them into Paris for centuries. It was how a king and his capital formally embraced, and everyone understood, without anyone saying it aloud, that this one carried extra freight, because this king and this capital had unfinished business. 12 years earlier, Paris had risen against the crown, chained its streets, besieged its own boy king, driven him out to sleep on straw. Everyone remembered. He remembered. The kitchens were sure of it, and events, decades of them, would prove the kitchens right. So when Paris built plaster mountains for him and hung its every wall with woven gold, it was not only love, it was also a city apologizing at the top of its lungs, and a king agreeing for one enormous day to pretend to be persuaded, none of which you knew or cared about at dawn on the day itself, because at dawn on the day itself you were 15 and free, the household's ordinary services suspended, the palace half emptied, everyone from the Maréchal des Logis down to Thomas released into the streets like the rest of the world. And the streets were already full at dawn. Full is the wrong word. The city had been filling for days from every province, roads streaming with people coming to see. They slept in courts and under the bridges and on the quays, and by that morning Paris held the biggest crowd it had held in living memory, maybe ever, and all of it was moving, or trying to move, toward the eastern edge of the city, toward the faubourg beyond the Porte Saint-Antoine, where a great throne platform had been raised for the day's first act. You went with Grégoire and Petit Jean and Thomas, the four of you moving through the crush like a hand through grain, and the crowd was its own country with its own weather, heat rising off packed bodies at 8 in the morning. The smell, sweat, dust, festival cooking, crushed flowers, horse, thickening by the hour into something you leaned against, sellers screaming their way through with skins of wine and baskets of plums and printed pictures of the royal pair, halfpenny woodcuts, the Queen's face already famous before the city had seen it. Pickpockets working the press so thick that men held their purses in their fists inside their shirts. Children riding shoulders in flocks, and over and through everything bells. Every bell in Paris, hundreds of them, ringing not the hours, but simply ringing, hour after hour, a bronze ocean with the city on its floor. The first act you never saw, and neither did almost anyone. Out on the throne platform beyond the gate, raised above the roads on a small artificial hill, the king sat in state, while the whole official world of Paris filed past for hour upon hour and gave itself to him. The Parlement in scarlet, the university, the guilds, the clergy, the city government, thousands upon thousands of men in their corporate splendour, each body with its speeches, its genuflections, its gift. That was the grammar of the day. Before the king entered the city piece by piece entered his presence and knelt. You heard it described 100 times after. What you had, where you stood wedged against a house front on the route inside the gate, was the sound of it. The tide of cheering out beyond the walls, swelling and settling and swelling for most of a broiling day, while the crowd around you fainted by ones and twos and was passed out over heads, and wine went around, and a man beside you held his small daughter up so long his arm shook and strangers took turns relieving him. And then, in the afternoon, the cannon spoke from the Bastille. The fortress towers were right there, hanging over the route, gun smoke rolling off them, and the bells doubled, which you had not believed possible. And the head of the procession came through the Porte Saint-Antoine, and the next 5 hours happened to you the way weather happens. It came in order, and the order was the kingdom itself, walked past you, body by body. Companies of horse in colours you had no names for, the mule trains of the great households, even the mules of Cardinal Mazarin wore velvet, and the crowd, God's honest truth, cheered the mules. The households of the great, hundreds of liveried men apiece, the princes trying to outshine one another by sheer expenditure of cloth. The king's own household, wave on wave, and you picked out, with a jolt like grabbing the greasy stair pillar, faces you knew, officers of the mouth, a clerk of the fruitery itself, men you'd seen scratching in ledgers by tallow light, now riding in blue and silver like saints in a window. The musketeers, the Swiss, your Swiss, or their parade brothers, halberds like a moving fence, heralds, marshals of France carrying batons, chancellor in gold, so old and so magnificent men laughed and cheered at once. Then a change came down the street ahead of what came next. A change in the noise itself. The cheering ahead rising past cheering into something rawer, a roar with a crack in it, and the crowd around you compressed like a held breath, and Thomas, on Gregoire's shoulders, began to hammer the top of Gregoire's head with both hands, wordless, pointing. The Queen came first in the order of your seeing because her chariot was the size of a house, an open triumphal car, gilded blind, blazing in the low sun, drawn by horses caparisoned to their hooves, and high on it, small in the middle of all that fire, a girl. That was your entire first thought, standing in the crushed and roaring street. She's a girl. 22 years old, fair-haired, Spanish pale, upright as a candle, in a dress so sewn with golden stones that when the chariot turned the corner, the whole street winced and shouted as the sun came off her, and she moved her hand at the crowd in the small ceaseless way of someone who has been moving her hand at crowds since dawn, and her face wore the expression you knew. You, specifically, of all the people in that street, knew it. The settled, held, far-from-home face of someone 8 months into a country not theirs, being watched by everyone belonging to a building. You had seen that face at a corridor window at first light with its chin on its hand. You would see it again there. The distance between a fruitery boy and a Queen of France is the distance between the river and the roof, and for 1/2 second on the Rue Saint-Antoine, it was the width of a look, because everyone in the Louvre lives far from home. It's only the size of the homes that differs. And then the king and the truth. The plain truth you'd swear on your mother's tongue click. He needed no chariot, and he knew it. He came on horseback, nearly alone in a bubble of space the procession held open around him, riding a tall horse at a walk, dressed, after a day of everyone else's gold, in silver and pearl, bareheaded part of the way so the city could see his face, and the crowd's roar when he passed was a physical thing, a pressure on the chest, and he rode through it the way you'd learn to walk through the palace, as if it were the natural element, as if there had never been another possibility. A 22-year-old man wearing 400,000 people like a coat. He was close. 15 feet, maybe less, when he passed your stretch of wall. You saw the horse's eye, white-edged and rolling at the noise, and the king's gloved hand lying on the rein as quiet as a hand on a table, and his face, young, heavy-lidded, already fleshing toward the medals and the marbles, turning slowly from side to side, giving each rank of windows its portion, and for the fraction of a fraction in which that turning gaze swept your piece of street, you, Nicolas Perrin, wheelwright's son, 11 candles short and 7 months invisible, stood in the eye of the King of France with the rest of the roaring world, and were for once exactly as visible as everyone else, which is to say, part of the coat. You roared too. That's the part you couldn't have predicted and can't fully explain, sleeping now over the bakehouse with a burned wrist. You knew what the wax cost. You knew who slept on the floors and what the stair-turning smelled like and what a page could take from a boy's basket without asking. You had, you would have said, no illusions left to spend. And when he passed, you roared until your throat tore and wept and hammered strangers on the back and meant all of it. Because the idea got you. That's what entries are for. That's what the plaster marble and the bronze ocean and the silver coat are for. One day when the idea comes down from the roofs and rides through the streets at a walk and lets everyone, for a few seconds each, believe they're inside it together. The rats presumably kept their heads. Rats always do. Everyone else in Paris that evening was drunk twice over, once on wine and once on France. It went on past dark. Fireworks over the river, fountains that ran wine in a few squares, and the fights that fountains of wine produce. The whole route's tapestries glowing under lanterns. The 4 of you walking home to the Louvre at midnight through streets carpeted in trampled flowers and broken pastry and sleeping strangers. Thomas asleep walking, actually asleep and walking, steered by Grégoire's hand on his collar, and the palace when you reached it lit at every window it possessed, blazing on the black river like a thing about to launch. 50 years from now, you will bore your grandchildren white with this day. You will get details wrong. Everyone did, immediately. The printed accounts were contradicting each other within the week. But you will have this over the printed accounts, and over the medals they struck, and over the tapestries they will one day weave of it. You were in the street. It smelled of crushed plums and gun smoke, and 400,000 of your neighbours. The Queen was a girl far from home. The King's hand was quiet on the rein. The mules wore velvet. And the same boy who saw all that carried tallow up the south stair the very next evening, 4:30 sharp, throat still raw from roaring, because the machine does not stop to be grateful, and the idea, having ridden through Paris in silver, still needed someone to hold its light. The sleeping boy over the bakehouse smiles at nothing and turns over in the straw, and the drawer of gold slides shut. He wakes at 2 in the afternoon to Thomas shaking his shoulder with a cracked hand, and the day is short, and the night comes at 4:30 and the rounds begin, and this is where we let the nights begin to pour together, because that is how he lived them. Not as a story, but as a season. November comes down on the Louvre like a lid. The cold you met in October was an introduction. The real thing arrives with December, and the real thing is a tenant, not a visitor. Now the water in the basin by the ladder stair wears ice by morning, and you crack it with the heel of your fist, and the first shock of the wash is a small daily death you stop bothering to dread. Now the wax in the storeroom stiffens so hard that the sticks ring faintly when they knock together, like thin bells, and wicks snap like twigs, and your snuffer's brass burns cold enough to stick briefly to a wet fingertip. Now the corridors have a new sound, the enormous silence of deep cold in which your own steps arrive very close and very dry, and under it, always, the tick and shift of the building's timbers shrinking, the Louvre muttering to itself in its sleep, and you know now, you will never again not know, to sort every one of those ticks with half an ear, hearth tick or wood tick or the third kind, the kind that has your whole attention before your mind has even named it. Because the fires are stoked higher now everywhere, and every stoked fire is your business. You have become, without anyone appointing you, a connoisseur of the palace's breathing. You know which chimneys draw sweet and which ones sulk. You know the smell of every kind of smoke this building makes. Oak, beech, sea coal in the offices, the sour flare of green wood some cheated woodyard delivered, the fatty reek of a kitchen flare-up, the resin of a torch, the way a shepherd knows his sheep's faces. Renard, who started it, now receives your reports like a bishop receiving tribute, cross-examines you on details, and has begun, terrifyingly, to teach you the ledgers themselves, evenings before the rounds, his wax-shined fingertip moving down columns. This is how an allocation is written. This is how it is padded. This is where the padding hides. A boy who can read the written system and smell the real one. Boy, that boy can go anywhere in this house. You suspect Renard is building something with you, an heir or a monument, and you let him, because the room is warm and the knowledge is power, and Madame's grandchildren watch from the third shelf with orange eyes. The court's winter closes around you too with its own weathers. The Christmas season fills the state floors with music and the gambler's corridor with new ruin. The Seine freezes at the edges, then, in January, right across, and Paris walks on it, and boys from the palace, you among them one iron-grey Sunday, slide on the black ice under the Pont Neuf with the frost-fair booths going up around you, and the city's smoke standing straight up into a sky like the inside of an oyster, and Thomas laughs so hard he cries, and it is the first time you've heard him laugh in 9 months, and you look away so as not to spend it. And through that whole winter, underneath everything, one fact tightens over the palace like ice over a river, and everyone below stairs feels it thickening week by week. The cardinal is dying. You track it the way the whole service world tracks it, by logistics. The physicians' comings and goings that you light along the river corridor grow from nightly to constant. Bernard's face at the Countess's landing goes from grey to greyer. The silver coin never misses a week, and the long stubs flow, and once, in February, he holds your shoulder a moment for no transactional reason at all, an exhausted man briefly leaning on a fence post and says nothing, and goes. The kitchens report the cardinal moved out to the chateau at Vincennes, east of the city for the air. The kitchens report the king visits him constantly. The kitchens report, lowering their voices because this is the part that matters, the part that will decide the shape of the century, though nobody in the kitchen puts it that way. That the dying man spends his last strength in long private sessions teaching the king how to rule. Hour after hour, the gambler who won a whole kingdom, counting out his winnings and his method to a pupil of 22 who forgets nothing. He dies at Vincennes in the first week of March 1661, before dawn. You hear it at the fruitery store at sundown from Vachon himself, who says it to the ledger tonelessly as if reporting weather. His Eminence died this morning. Morning allocations are posted, black wax for the chapel, and the next morning the thing happens that France will talk about for 100 years, and history will talk about forever. The great men come to the young king and ask, as a matter of course, the only question that has mattered in this kingdom since before you were born, to whom shall we go now? Who will govern? And the king says, to me, no new minister, no new cardinal. He will govern himself. Every council, every paper, every day, the king's own hands on the machine. And the great world is politely certain the whim will not survive the spring, and the great world is wrong, and it will be wrong for 54 more years. Below stairs the reaction is simpler and as usual more accurate. Marguerite hears the news, jerks her chin at the whole invisible state floor above her ovens, and delivers the below-stairs verdict in one sentence. Now we'll all be counted. Bernard had said the same thing in October in the maids' corridor with a candle in his hand. When His Eminence dies, everything in this building will be recounted, and it is beginning. You can feel it that very spring. A new tautness coming down through the ledgers, new signatures, the young king reaching down into his own household's pockets, and within a few months the whole kingdom will feel it, when the king's men arrest the most magnificent man in France, the finance minister with the private palace that outshone the Louvre. And the message lands on every gilded head in the country at once. There is no fortune, no office, and no man that will not be counted now. But that is the great world, and the great world as ever reaches you translated into waxen rounds. What reaches you untranslated that same year is fire, the one you were promised, the one this building had been saving up. You are not on duty the February night the Petite Gallery's neighbour burns, the night the great gallery wing catches, the ceilings with their painted gods, the scaffolds of the decorators feeding the flames. But no one in the palace sleeps through it. You stand in the frozen court with thousands of others, Thomas's shoulder against your arm, and watch fire own a piece of the Louvre from the inside, window after window filling with that unmistakable moving gold and the sound of it. That is what the others learn that night, and you already knew. The sound is the guard-room hearth, made vast, a huge domestic contentment, ticking and whispering and roaring at the scale of history, eating painted heavens by the yard while the bucket chains do what bucket chains can. They stop it in the end. The wing is lost, the palace is saved. The Italian painter's masterpieces go up the winter sky as sparks, exactly as you once imagined the king's going, and the king, the kitchen's report, walks the wet black ruin the next day in silence. And something in him files the Louvre one notch furthest down a private list and far away to the west of the city, where his father once kept a little hunting lodge in the marshes of a village called Versailles. A crew will soon begin very quietly to dig. You watch the fire from the court with your night-trained nose full of the enormity of it, and Kessler finds you in the crowd, off duty, wrapped, grey, and stands beside you a while, saying nothing, and then says in his stone French, the epitaph of your whole year. Yours was 3 buckets. That one is 1,000. Same animal. He watches the ceiling fall in, 400 feet away, in perfect silence at this distance, a soundless bloom of sparks. You keep smelling, boy. You keep smelling. Seasons turn. The building teaches, the rounds grind, the stub arithmetic flows, the shadow ledger pays. Gregoire finishes his time in the woodyard and takes a porter's place. A new boy comes to the loft, greener than Thomas ever was, and it is Thomas. Thomas of the cracked hands, Thomas of the pocketed bread, who sits on the edge of the new boy's pallet the first bad night and tells him, gruffly, magnificently at the ceiling, it gets smaller. You hear it from your own straw and keep your smile in the dark where it's nobody's business. And you're 16 now, then 17, and the thing Renard was building is built. You can read a ledger and smell a flue, speak to a Swiss sergeant and a cardinal secretary and a pastry cook in each one's own coin, carry the written system in one hand and the real one in the other, and never let them touch. There is talk, Vachon-level talk, dry, unpromised, of a garçon ordinaire's place opening, a real office, wages on the books, a coat. The village boy who walked down from Montmartre would not recognize the person. This building has ground and greased and burned into being. Your mother would. Mothers see through masonry. On quiet evenings between rounds, there are quiet evenings now. Rank has hours in it. You sit sometimes on the stair by Renard's door with a heel of Marguerite's bread in the brazier light spilling under the door and listen to the palace run. The far violins, the near rats, the river through the wall, the whole vast idea humming in its stone, and you find you can hold both of your countries in your head at once without either one calling the other a lie. The silver king on the quiet-handed horse, and the frozen basin, the roaring street, and the stair that smells, the gallery of the kings, and the beam they cut burning out of its roof. Both true, both the Louvre. The gold is real, and the grease is real, and the gold floats on the grease, and now you know it, and knowing it is your office deeper than any coat Vachon can give you. Rats slept better than kings here. They still do. They always will, in every palace, in every century, because sleep goes to whoever owes the day nothing, and everyone else, kings, queens, cardinals, countesses, clerks, cooks, Swiss and boys, lies down each night still holding their piece of the idea, and holds it in their sleep. The way you once held a basket so long that your empty arm kept the shape of the handle till morning. But there are worse things to hold. You finish the bread. Below, the clock gathers itself and strikes the half-hour. 4:30, sundown. You pick up the basket and the handle finds its groove, and the little sun goes up the stairs to light the night. This night and the next, and all the nights stretching out ahead, the same as yesterday, the same as tomorrow, the same as always. And that right there is where we leave him climbing. Because the rest of this story doesn't belong to him anymore. It belongs to you. Because you're the one lying in the dark now, aren't you? You've been lying in the dark this whole time. So let's put the palace to bed together, you and I, the way the grey round does it. Room by room, light by light. The guard room first. The Swiss are sleeping sitting up, arms folded, the cards squared away, the hearth banked to a red murmur behind the iron. Tick, one candle out. The smoke curls and the dark comes in behind it like water behind a boat. Soft, patient, warm at the edges. The maid's corridor. The doors are quiet now. The girl who cried has stopped crying. The girl far from home is home enough for tonight. The sconces go out one by one under the little brass box tick-tick, and the old dry panelling stands easy in the dark, unscorched, unburned, keeping its 400 years to itself. The gambler's corridor, the dice are still. The fortunes have stopped moving. Even ruin has to sleep. The kitchen court. The ovens are banked and their heat is rising slow and enormous through the floors, through the bakehouse ceiling, up into a low straw loft where 4 boys lie breathing in a row, and the warmth gathers around them the way it has gathered every night for 400 years, the way it is gathering around you now, heavy even, rising from below, asking nothing. And the gallery of the kings, last of all. 8 small flames, and the faces watching, and the boy moving down the long dark room, putting out the light in front of 4 centuries of crowned eyes, tick, 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 and none of them object. They know how nights end. They had 10,000 nights apiece. Those faces, 10,000 risings and ceremonies and fears and suppers, and every single one of those nights ended the same way yours is ending. The light gets smaller, the sounds get farther, the day lets go. Centuries will pass. The boy will grow old and tell his grandchildren about a silver king on a quiet horse, and the grandchildren will grow old, and the palace will outlive them all and go on changing the way it always changed. Wings rising, wings burning, courts closing over the old moats. The king who forgot nothing will build his way out of Paris at last, out to the marshes of Versailles, and take the whole golden idea with him, and the Louvre will stand half empty for a lifetime, leased out in corners, artist camping in the galleries, weeds, actual weeds in the great court, and then it will fill again, differently. The king's pictures will stay and the kings will go, and one day the doors will simply open, and the crowd from the Rue Saint-Antoine, the roaring, plum-smelling, 400,000-eyed crowd, will walk in off the street and own the place, and file past the small dark portrait of the merchant's wife with the folded hands, and stand in rooms a fruiterie boy once crossed on wooden St. feet with a basket of light. The building you fell asleep in tonight is still there. That's not a figure of speech. The stones he touched on the spiral stair, polished black by hands. Hands still touch them. The river still breathes through the low walls, and somewhere under the newest floors in the oldest dark the descendants of Madame's 6 little ones still hold their territories, still take their tax, still owe the day nothing, still sleep better than anyone above them, and always will. Some things don't change. The cold gives way to warmth, and that doesn't change. The work ends, and that doesn't change. The body that carried the basket all night gets to put it down. That has never once, in all the centuries, failed to happen. Every night since the first fire in the first dark, the same mercy has come around at the same hour to the same tired species. Kings and boys, queens and cooks, all of them finally allowed to stop, and now it's come around to you. You're warm enough, fed enough, safe enough. You have a roof and a bed, and tomorrow will keep until tomorrow. That's more than most of the people in this story had, and they slept anyway, every one of them, every night, and so can you. So let the basket down. Let your arm forget the handle. Let the counting stop. No ledgers now, no stubs, no thumb running down the wax. Whatever was taken from your basket today, let it be tomorrow's problem. The drain is hungry, and the alibi is fat, and nothing more can be asked of you tonight. Let the rounds be over. The guardroom is out, the corridor is out, the gallery is out. Every flame you are responsible for is safely dark, and the one light left in the whole vast building is the small one you're holding now, behind your eyes. Let it gutter. The sounds are going farther away. The violins upstairs, faint then fainter. The river through the wall, the dry small industry inside the old stone, patient, unbothered, almost company. A bell somewhere across the water, striking an hour too far away to count. The warmth is coming up from below like a tide, and you're lying in it the way the boy lay in it, in your clothes, too tired to guard anything, and there is nothing left to guard. 400 years of nights have ended exactly like this one. Every single one of them was survived. Let this one go too. Sleep now, the way the rats sleep, owing nothing, fearing nothing, deep in the warm wall of the world. Good night.